but let's just frame the terms of the debate here. My
Okay.
understanding was all we the burden of proof is on us only to prove that blockchain is a useful technology.
Yeah. I
Well.
was more just like rambling. But
Oh
I
yeah, sure. That's fine. It's just before we get too far into it, I want to make
yeah,
sure
yeah,
we're
yeah. I think
establishing
that's good.
the terms here.
Yeah, that's fair.
So what I would say is not useful, but better along some metric. You can
Yeah,
define whatever metric you want, but it has to, because Rube Goldberg machines are in fact useful. They are useful.
yeah, that's a fair point. All right, so
Okay.
better than any other viable alternative for a particular use case.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, let me just also add though a little bit of nuance there, and that is that many disruptive technologies start out actually crappier than and let me clarify that. They're crappier to begin with than some other alternative in along various dimensions, but they typically allow a new demographic of consumers to have access to something that they didn't before. And a good example of that would be like the PC. It was crappier than the other computers of its time, and most, serious manufacturers didn't think it would be that useful for even small businesses to use, but it allowed consumers to start having computers in their homes and do things with them that were actually useful for them. And it eventually displaced the mini computers and the larger machines of its time, right? So, also like Japanese imports, Japanese auto imports were in almost every way worse than U.S. manufacturers' cars, but they were a lot cheaper, and so they allowed a new group of consumers to own cars for the first time, right?
So we could talk about it in terms of capabilities today, but also in terms of future potential.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
I think so.
I
I
think
think
that's
so
fair.
too. So the
Um,
thing I was gonna bring up was that's the premise of the innovator's solution.
The
Is
innovator's
that
dilemma.
no, innovator's solution.
that was the second book. I
Right.
never read it, but
Innovator's solution is the important book.
Well, doesn't he mention this in the innovator's dilemma? That's kind of where he proposes the whole theory of disruptive innovation.
Yeah, probably. I remember the first book, which I don't ever mention by name as to not confuse people, but that one wasn't. That one was marginally informative and important compared to the innovator solution, which is truly that's the meat. The first book was
Okay.
the milk, and the second book is the meat. Anyway, we got a bunch of people on now. Can we do a quick sound check? Make sure everybody. I think I'm gonna take off the having technical difficulties banner here, but let's just do a first check. Everybody do a mic check. You can hear me loud and clear. All right, Carl.
Yes, how do I sound to you all?
Good enough. Nate,
hello, hello.
sounds good. And Ryan. Oh, we don't hear you yet. Okay, so we're still having a little bit of technical difficulty.
I'm here.
All right, you're here. Sweet. Okay.
Hey.
I'm gonna flash a little animation here. First, let me get rid of the tech issues. I'm gonna flash a little animation here, and we're gonna officially welcome everybody, and I will try to moderate questions. So, 3, 2, 1.
All right, so Ryan, while you were gone, we were discussing we were framing the debate to some degree. Does anyone want to recap for Ryan?
Let me go ahead and start this off. Let
Sure.
me kick this off
All right.
now, and then
All right.
I will reframe that. So, hello, and welcome Oh, the camera's right here today. Hello, and welcome everybody. I'm AJ O'Neill. This is Beyond Code Live, and we have with us a couple of blockchain Web3, let's say, experts. I think expert is definitely fair in the case of Carl from a technical and organizational standpoint, as well as Rion. And I don't know, Nate, if you are an expert or just an enthusiast. Where would you where would you? It's okay to call yourself an expert. There's no negative points here for having confidence in your.
I feel that in all aspects of life, I'm still a journeyman, and where you draw that boundary is very arbitrary and subjective.
Oh,
Sorry, got to bring the truth.
well, yeah, but anyway,
One of his
uh,
greatest qualities is his humility.
I'm the
that's not
humblest guy
mine
I
though.
know.
All right. So the way that I want to tee this up is basically I am a skeptic. Everybody knows that I'm a skeptic. I'm not a believer in blockchain technologies in general. I'm a huge believer in cryptography, public-private keys, Merkle trees, all sorts of things, but not what at least. I think maybe if blockchain is different now, maybe it needs a rebranding. But so my position is I am trying to um, clear up some of the FUD around it. Well, no, it's more the hype, I guess. That's my intention is to show the emperor has no clothes, and leave you
You want to
defenseless.
add to the FUD.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see which way it goes. I would like to start out with just a little bit of introduction per person as to what your kind of roles have been, why you are knowledgeable in this area. And I want to talk about what problems, I guess in general, Web3 is trying to solve because there's just not enough buzzwords to contain it all. That we need more buckets to invest in. And when the blockchain bucket gets full, we need a new buzzword to throw money at. So I want to kind of figure out what are the buzzwords and what do they mean and what problem are they actually trying to solve. And then are they actually solving it at all? And then for those of you watching in, hello everybody. This is my normal thing is live coding and whatnot, but welcome to all of you. You're free to leave questions on Twitch or YouTube. I'll try to moderate those. They do not have links in them. I will give a link to the Discord in a little bit so that if you have something that for some reason doesn't show up on YouTube or Twitch properly, that you can ask the question that way. Also, there's a few people I might allow to come in for a voice question as well. So we'll do that. So let's go ahead and start with me. I'll start. I'm just a programmer, a lowly programmer. I understand hashes. I understand cryptography. I wrote the most popular client for Let's Encrypt for Node.js, which is called Greenlock. It's deployed quite widely. So I have the technical chops in understanding the pieces of what a blockchain is and the security measures and stuff like that. Very well versed with DNS, HTTP, TCP network protocols in general. So I'm the scientist here, is what I'll phrase myself as. So Carl, you go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, Carl Youngblood. I have a master's degree in computer science as well, and a pretty strong software engineering background. I've been doing full stack engineering for the last 25 years of my career. And I would say for the last 10 years or so, I've been very excited about blockchain. And for the last 5 years, I've been working full time in the space. Most recently as a blockchain specialist for AWS, in charge of solutions architecture for the Amazon managed blockchain service. And I helped to launch the infrastructure and digital asset custody solutions for the Tezos network, which was one of the first proof of stake blockchains. And that's probably enough background about me. So I've been really into blockchain lately and working full time for quite a while in the space.
All right. Nate, since you're next in the squares, why don't you go?
Sure. So I've been a programmer for, about 25 years now. I work primarily as a software architect. Spent about 4 years at a fintech startup, got acquired, and then got pulled back into the crypto space for the first time since about 2015. Involved in one crypto investment firm. Yeah, Not sure what else to tell you.
All right, and then Ryan.
I'm probably the least technical of all of us in terms of programming, but that's actually part of my argument is that blockchains and cryptocurrency are actually not primarily a technical or programming solution, nor is it solving a technical or programming problem. But my involvement with cryptocurrency and blockchains is basically I got involved. I bought my first Bitcoin in 2013, so I've been around in the space for quite a while. And then probably a few years after that, I discovered well, I was first involved with Bitcoin. Obviously, I'm very excited about Bitcoin. Quit my job as a mechanical engineer eventually, and just been gradually moving my way into the cryptocurrency space as a career. And I'm currently involved with the Dash blockchain, the Dash cryptocurrency, as a project manager of sorts for software development. So I am somewhat well versed with software development, but not an expert developer, just an amateur developer.
All right. So thank you, everybody. And by the way, those of you watching in, I see there's a lot of people joining. Hello, welcome. Feel free to ask questions on YouTube or Twitch at any time, or pop in the Discord if the question doesn't show up there for some reason. I'll try to moderate those. So my first question is I want to be real with people about what a blockchain is, because my pet peeve is that there's all this marketing material and no one will actually say what it is. And from my perspective, at the end of the day, it's essentially you're doing a division and remainder operation to prove that a computational game, the computers playing a game are doing division and remainder operations to prove who's the winner. That it's really, that is what a blockchain is down at its core. It's stacking these essentially proofs of winning a mathematical game on top of each other, and that you can put some arbitrary data in with the proof that you won that round of the game. And that's kind of the way that I try to dumb it down. I don't know if that's fair, but that's...
No, I think already you're narrowing things down a little bit too much by describing it that way. What you seem to be describing is the proof of work consensus mechanism that is currently used by Bitcoin and some other blockchains, but there are other consensus mechanisms that don't have the same kind of contest for finding, a valid magic number, essentially, by exhaustively searching a key space. Right? So there are other ways that it's not always a contest in order to produce the next block or to validate the next block. And I could describe other consensus mechanisms if you'd like to.
So we could say that a blockchain at its core is a consensus mechanism, but the definition of that consensus mechanism is not well defined because it could be one of many. But I think that there's three that are popular.
Well, I'd say there's actually quite a few more than just three. And what I would say a good term that I've used to describe this space is distributed ledger technology, DLT. Sometimes we hear it. And the reason for that is that there are other ways and other data structures besides just blockchain for producing the same outcomes or similar outcomes. And the main outcome that we want here is some kind of a shared ledger or record that is world writable by individuals who can prove that they have permission to write, essentially. So that's a new useful tool that blockchains invented for the first time, is like a world writable database, if you will.
Yeah.
Ryan,
So let me actually jump in here, just because I mean we're calling this blockchain. Let's get real clear right off the bat what a blockchain is and what a blockchain is not. A blockchain, you know, I think a lot of people have heard this explanation, so sorry for the viewers who have heard this a lot, but a blockchain is a chain of blocks. But the devil's in the details, obviously. What do the blocks hold? The blockchain is a data structure. It's a data structure that you'd probably be familiar with, AJ, and others, as kind of a linked list, I think is what computer programmers would call that.
Yeah.
And it's the linking of the list that involves the consensus algorithm that Carl was talking about, how that list gets linked and who has access to write these things. So a block contains transactions. The transaction is also a data structure. It's a data structure that says, here's some data, and I want to change the state of the data from this state to this state. That's a transaction. And then these transactions get broadcast throughout the network of whatever cryptocurrency network we're talking about. And then those transactions get bundled as we're waiting over time, and they get bundled into a block of transactions. So that's what a block of transactions is. And then at some point, that block of transactions, you could say, gets a stamp of approval on it by certain people in the network. In proof of work blockchains, that stamp of approval is made by miners. And in proof of stake networks, that stamp of approval is made by what's called validators, but they're both doing the same kind of thing. They're saying this block of transactions is valid. And in the case of proof of work, that validity might not actually end up being completely valid or settled, as you might think of. But that's what the blocks are, and they're chained together, meaning that to provide some sense of sequence in the transaction. So Carl had something to say.
Yeah, if I could just share with you like a very short, 30-second description from Balaji Srinivasan, who's another expert in this field, about where, we're talking about some of the ways that blockchains, employ certain data structures and certain ways of linking data together. I think at a higher level, we could talk about the features that they provide that are novel and useful. And he's described it in a really succinct way that I think is really useful. If it's all right, do you mind if I share this briefly?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So he says public blockchains are massively multi-client open state databases. This is a real breakthrough. We've now got a reliable way to incentivize the use of shared state to simultaneously allow millions of individuals and companies access to read from and thousands to write to the same data store while enforcing a common standard and maintaining high confidence in the integrity of the data. This is very different from the status quo. You typically don't share the root password to your database on the internet because a database that allows anyone to write to it usually gets corrupted. Public blockchains solve this problem with cryptography rather than permissions, greatly increasing the number of simultaneous users. In other words, public blockchains are massively multi-client open state databases where every user is a root user. One way to understand this viscerally is to look at btc.com, blockchair.com, and blockcipher.com and realize that all of them are simultaneously reading from the same Bitcoin blockchain. And then look at Coinbase.com, Binance.com, and Kraken.com to realize that all of them are likewise simultaneously reading and writing transactions to the same Bitcoin blockchain. And finally, to look at miners like Antpool, F2Pool, and via BTC and realize that all of them are reading and writing blocks to the same Bitcoin blockchain. Any user with an internet connection can read. Anyone with some BTC can write a transaction, and anyone with sufficient compute power can mine a Bitcoin block. That's what a public blockchain means. Every user is a root user.
Okay, real quick, we do have a question on Twitch. I want to acknowledge that. I want to finish up with this first, and then I'll get to that question. But I just want to acknowledge so that they know I'm seeing it.
Yeah, so I think that very succinct description helps you to understand some of the new feature set of this new data structure, this new distributed network, basically. And yes, there are various consensus mechanisms, various pros and cons of each particular flavor of blockchain, or distributed ledger technology if you want to go even broader, because not all of them. But
yeah, I think that. Sorry,
yeah,
Carl, continue.
That's kind of some of the core innovations of blockchains, I would say.
Yeah, I think the core primitives are really the distributed consensus mechanism and having an immutable record of transactions going back to the beginning that is, publicly writable, publicly auditable. And I mean, just from a visual perspective, if you think about any, demo chat application or anything like that somebody throws up on the internet, like how quickly is it overrun by just nonsense, right? So this is the first and only kind of database that gets more valuable with more participation in an open way instead of less.
More costly, more valuable?
Yes, I would say more valuable given that the current price of Bitcoin is, let's see, a $38,000 proof by construction.
Well, I would also add that there is no other world writable database out there that has the properties that we just described.
So this, I think, is an interesting point. I'm not so onto the, well, because people are paying a lot of money, it's worth a lot. Have you ever heard of Hollister? They just
definition of value.
Okay, yes. Yes, there's the economical definition. Whatever people are willing to pay is what it's worth. I get that, but
I agree with AJ that what we should be able to come up with a more robust argument than merely this is valuable because lots of people are willing to pay for it.
Yeah, because it's more. Well, this goes into the question. I'm going to read this question now. So, Nunya Beers says, "Hey guys, so my question is number one, coins are they like stock? Is it like a stock market for buying a coin, or coins? Do you pay the price that it's currently valued at?" So I think I'm just going to give a simple answer, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to the way a stock market functions in that as demand for a certain stock increases, then the price of that stock goes up because everyone who buys the stock increases the total market capitalization of the stock, which thereby, when divided by the number of shares in circulation, increases the price per share, right?
And for this is one of my beefs about when people talk about net worth and they talk about billionaires. The billionaires don't actually have the billions of dollars that people think they do, because you're taking the most expensive recently paid price and then you're projecting that across the entire all bits of all of it ever. So one person pays $100 per share. Now every share is magically calculated as if all shares in sum total are worth $100 each.
No, that's not actually how the math works. The math works that there is a certain number of shares in circulation, and there's a certain total amount of money or capital behind those shares, right? And the price per share is merely the total capital divided by the number of shares. So if you buy another share, you've increased the capital by that amount that you put into it. So let's say the price is 100 and I buy one share. I've just increased the total capital behind that entire company by $100. And therefore, the total capital divided by the number of shares is now slightly higher than it was before. It's now $100 higher, and the price per share is therefore 100 divided by the total number of shares higher. Does that make sense?
We're getting into some economic weeds here.
Well, I agree.
About the price of the tokens on a blockchain. that's an important topic, but I think AJ's, so for anyone just tuning in, basically AJ against the three of us. There's three proponents here, and then AJ is kind of a skeptic, but I would actually say that I would probably say the other two guys here were probably skeptics from the beginning as well, and I'm still skeptical. I'm a skeptic by nature, and I think a lot of people in blockchain industry are skeptical, but they've done the research. So I would say that, I don't know, you guys decided on the format for this debate, but it seems to me that a good format would be basically, AJ, you tell us your gripes, and then we clear up any confusions. And then if there's gripes after confusion is cleared up, then, that's difference of opinion. But let's at least get to the facts of what is and what is not true as far as the facts go.
I did want to briefly clarify that when we talk about cryptocurrencies in particular, that is only one application of blockchains, right? That's one way one very prominent way that they've been used. But there are many other things that can be done with them. So while I would love to dive deeper, if you want to, AJ, into this question of how coins work, which was prompted by a listener, of course.
I do want to finish that question. There was a part 2 to his question, and then I'd be happy to move on.
Yeah, sure.
So that part 2 of the question was, how can you verify that a coin or a blockchain isn't a scam? I've seen political and public figures vouch for services or coins up to and including naming their own coin, and it's all a scam. Are we talking about Elon Musk? Basically, well, he didn't create Dogecoin, but he made it a thing.
Before we even start to address that question, you have to define what a scam is.
Ah, yes,
which is what most people don't do. That's the problem, and that's why most people talk over each other, because you don't have a shared definition of what a scam is. Something can be wildly, outrageously priced or something like that, but not be a scam, as long as the facts are revealed and there's no actual lying going on or fraud going on. So
right. So Enron stock was a scam because there was fraud and there was known maligned will,
an intent to deceive.
And and spot on.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't think that we can answer that question. How do you know if a coin or a blockchain is a scam? Because you would have to know if there's an intent to deceive, and the best way that you could do that is maybe look at some public statements and records and see if they start to line up over time. And a lot of these companies, I think, do kind of scammy things, but then you could say, well, it's legal in the Cayman Islands, so.
And just because I work with lots of attorneys, none of this is financial advice. Standard disclaimers apply. It's like any other investment. You have to do your own research. Like I could go, fork the Bitcoin code base and, call it Natecoin and start distributing clients, but like nobody's going to buy it. The fundamental answer is all value is based on belief. That's the, abstract philosophical answer. The practical answer is like, do your own research. Don't try to chase, the next meme coin coming out. You're going to get burned. Do your homework just like you would with any other investment.
I would even actually go further with our definition of a scam here. It's not only with an intent to deceive, but you have to both have an intent to deceive and the actual fact of deceiving. So you can have like an intent to deceive and say, this is going to be the best thing ever, and this is going to go to the moon, and that might be, you might be deceiving them, but as long as you're still revealing all the facts about, how many coins are in existence, what the supply is, what the supply schedule is, all those things are the facts, and you have to be actually deceiving people in fact, and not just deceiving people, trying to deceive people.
That's fair. Usually that question comes from a place of, hey, how can I make a quick buck? And that's just the wrong question.
So I would also add that it's common for, well, like there's a really popular video lately that has been very deceptive, in my opinion, about blockchain. It's called Line Goes Up, and a lot of people have been quoting it to me lately. Um, and the reason why I think it's in some ways so deceptive is that it's like quite convincing to someone who's not very closely connected with the blockchain space. But then there's all these little errors in it that are ultimately inaccurate. But one of the things he says that I think is an example of these inaccuracies, that's what we're talking about right now, is he, claims that a lot of the almost religious terminology and language that you hear amongst blockchain enthusiasts is is based on an intent to deceive. When in reality, I think that the more honest answer, the more accurate answer, is that there are just a bunch of zealots, right, who love what they're doing, who think it's amazing, and who actually have probably unrealistic expectations of its abilities, even beyond. I mean, let's face it. I am an enthusiast of crypto and blockchain, but I'm not nearly as rabidly crazy as some of these folks can be in some of these forums and stuff. But I don't think it's accurate to say that they're trying to rip people off for the most part. I think it's more accurate to say that they are just super gung ho crypto bros that like just think that this is the most amazing thing ever, and they love to drink the Kool-Aid, and that's just they're not trying to rip people off.
Yeah, well, I think where you get these people with these very strong beliefs is when you start to realize, the nature of our current financial system, how it came about, and how its stated purpose is to steal from you. And the scales start to fall about the nature of the system that we're living within. And that's where that religious fervor, if you will, comes in.
Well,
Right. And you also have to, along the lines of this scam thing, is you have to ask yourself, compared to what? If you're genuinely asking whether cryptocurrency is a scam, then clearly you must have already also asked whether our current financial system is also a scam, right? Right? Like,
Hint, it's definitely a scam.
it's definitely a scam, even though most people don't know about that or acknowledge it.
I want to push back against this notion as well. Like, I would never try to claim that our current financial system has no fraud in it and that there's no institutional abuse or corruption or like waste involved. Certainly there's tons of that. But actually, I would say that I still think a majority of actors in our financial system, our existing traditional financial system, are acting in good faith. I don't think
Which ones?
I don't.
Well, I don't want to go down the weeds too deep on this, Carl. I want you to finish your comment, but
Yeah.
we're getting into economics and politics, which
my main point is just that I kind of want to reject the standard crypto answer, which is just like, oh, it's all a scam and this is just more transparent than it was before, or whatever. But I'm just kind of saying that I'm not as skeptical of authority and of the existing system. I'm more conservative in that sense, in that, like, the traditional conservative stance is if something isn't broken, don't try to fix it, right? Because or like Chesterton's famous for his fence, right? If there's a fence somewhere that you want to tear down, first you got to explain why it was put there in the first place, and then if you have a good explanation for that, then you can decide whether it's worth tearing down or not. And I think that that's a fair position to take, because yes, there are lots of problems in the existing system, but it does work to a certain extent. And I think that I personally think the crypto community can tend to be a little bit too like extremist in that sense, and somewhat way too libertarian, and maybe a little just not like as pragmatic, and not as actually aware of how the current system even functions, or like how it got to the way it is now. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't have issues, but yeah, that's kind of my point.
Can I just say one more thing about that? I agree with you, Carl, to this extent. We're going to find out real quick whether the incumbent financial system and those that are in charge of it are actually good-willed. Because I agree that our current financial system might not be a scam, on this one condition, that they allow other financial systems to exist on the same playing field. So if we find, and we already have found really, that this current financial system and those that are in control of it are not willing to let cryptocurrencies compete with it, then that's a pretty good sign that there's actually, that it is a scam, that our current financial system is at least a trap, because, you know, if they're so good-willed, then why not let cryptocurrencies compete with that?
I think it is provably a scam, and far worse than that. And again, I think this is something that you can demonstrate.
Well, I want to pull us back from that, because then we're going into the government and politics, and it's a different set of beliefs. And I know a lot of people in the Web3 community, if we can even, the sense I'm getting is it's too difficult to even pin down Web3 to a community or blockchain to a community, because we still have not yet produced what I would be able to consider a functional definition of what a blockchain is. The best I got is there's a thing that can store some data, and it can be global, and there's a way to verify some stuff. Which,
all right, I'll take a crack at a concise definition.
Okay, you're gonna.
It is an immutable record of transactions that is validated by a a distributed consensus mechanism. Would you guys say that's fair?
Yeah, I think it's a definition.
It's a data structure, AJ. A blockchain is nothing more than a data structure. The only thing that's interesting about this data structure is how it comes to be, and how it becomes to be, how it's viewed as valid or not.
That's a social data structure, if you will.
One of my criticisms has been that, and this continues to be the case, too much shifting of the goalpost. Whenever I attack some aspect of the blockchain, just like what happened, the blockchain, there's no such thing as the blockchain. People call it the blockchain because there was the Bitcoin blockchain, but anyway, I say, okay, this is how a blockchain works, and this is the problems with it. And anytime I do that, people shift the goalpost. They say, oh, that's just proof of work. And I say, well, then this is the problem. Oh, that's just proof of stake. I say, well, this is the problem with it. Oh, that's just proof of storage. So no matter what it is that's the problem, the goalpost is always shifting so that you can never define a specific set of features that work. Well, it almost seems that the blockchain is the vision of solving the 2 of 3 problem with a 3 of 3, and pretending that you don't actually have 10 different solutions, that none of which can solve 3 of 3, because the 3 of 3 problem, for those of you that aren't familiar, the 3 of 3 problem is basically along any thing that I don't even know how to adequately explain it, but there's always trade-offs no matter what you're talking about, no matter what manufacturing process or economic process, anything, there's always a triangle, and you can only get 2 sides of the triangle at the time. And the traditional one is you can have it fast, you can have it cheap, or you can have it good. And then if you go to databases, it's you can have it consistent, you can have it available, or you can have it, somebody help me. What's the third one on that?
It's CAP, consistent, available.
Performant?
No, it's like partitions. No, that doesn't sound right.
Partition tolerant? Anyway.
I gotta look it up now.
Yeah. Let me.
That's right. Consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. The system continues to operate despite network failures, basically.
That's what it is.
Yes. Which, and that would be one of my main complaints about the blockchain. But again, someone's going to say, well, that's only this type of blockchain, whatever. It almost feels that blockchain is just become such a generic, muddied term that we can't really define it.
Okay. No, sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
Blockchain was not even a term in Satoshi's white paper. I'm not sure if you know that, but
no, I did not know that.
Blockchain is a term that came about later on by people trying to explain what it is. But so don't get hung up on the term. Let's talk about what it actually is and the validity of that concept of what it actually is.
That's the problem. Is everybody calls it something different. Everybody has a different name for it.
what also I hear you doing is you're basically saying you're cherry picking problems and then claiming that thereby proves that the entire thing has no utility at all. And I'm saying that leap is your fallacy right there. The leap to say, yes, because there is this problem here, that problem there, and I can play whack-a-mole with all the problems, that thereby this thing I'm criticizing has no utility whatsoever.
I just
Let's make a
never.
very specific use case that we can all agree on. How about
That's
Bitcoin is the best form of money that has ever existed?
No, I cannot agree on that. I'm sorry.
I can't either, actually.
Even the crypto enthusiast here can't agree on that one. I apologize.
That's fine. Let's pick a different one.
Well,
It's a little bit too far.
I'm gonna broaden the discussion a little bit because I'm just gonna leave us in the mud on this one for right now, because I think we'll just go round and round because I've done this before. So I think this is fair that we've got 4 people cannot whatever viewers have been able to glean about what we've said. There's a data structure and there's consensus. I think Nate said it best. That's all we've got. And as far as the implementation detail, it's, well, whatever way you want to implement it, but in the constraints. But let's move on. There's a question here that actually I think is going to drive us in the right direction. Ishan says, hi all, I have a query about what are the other uses or applications of a blockchain apart from, and I'm going to redact this here, from currency, because it frustrates me to no end that people use the term crypto and they don't mean cryptography. Go on.
Okay, why isn't it interesting, Ryan?
It is interesting, but it's, I guess we can go down here, but the origin of blockchains was for money. That's what blockchains were invented. That's what it was invented for. But I think there's a different way to tackle this that will eventually get to that point. And here's what I would say. So AJ, if I asked you, is a database an important technology? What would you say? Does it help us solve problems? It's just a normal classic database.
So if you get specific and you say a SQL database, yes. If you say a database, well, that's
the concept of database.
The concept of a database is just, there's no definition to that, because all it means is that you can store some data somewhere. It doesn't.
That's all.
Right, but like, isn't that useful to do? To be able
You
to
can write records, you can read records. There's a primary key.
Yeah.
Well, there's not necessarily a primary key.
Usually.
Yeah, but
for the sake of argument, why not?
Yeah. I mean, yes, the concept of a database. Yes, the concept of, yes, it's useful.
Okay, simple enough. I pinned you down to at least that one thing. Databases can be useful, and so the next question is, with databases, obviously comes permissions to write to the database, right? And permissions to read from the database, right? So if that data that's being stored is very important to the whole world or to a whole community, do you see any risks in the person that is in charge of maintaining that database? Knowing the fallibility of man and the corruptibility of man, and the fact that one person or some small group of people is in charge of maintaining that database, that's very, very important to the survival of the whole economy. Like, would you acknowledge that there would be some kind of risk to putting a few people in charge of that database?
So I'm a federalist. I believe that that we should be free to join communities that match, that we form communities that match our belief systems around a basis of trust. And I don't believe in a hypothetical scenario in which there is something that's important to the entire globe that must be transacted on. So you've put me in the dilemma of the mule between two buckets of water. I don't care, because there is no hypothetical mule that's going to starve of thirst to death. Which is that, do we call it starving of thirst? There's no mule that's going to do that because it's stuck between two buckets of water. Likewise, there is no database that exists that's so massively important to humankind. So I don't believe
so
in
your
problems on that
problem-
level.
Your problem is you don't understand the problem that blockchains are trying to solve. Then, if you don't understand that certain databases are important to a whole community of people.
Yes, community. Yes, a community, but communities have a natural structure to them as per the way that humans have evolved. So all communities have some similar structures. Now, sometimes that goes bad and people are hurt or they die or they don't survive, but communities form a structure where there has to be some form of trust or there is no community. And within that sphere of trust, there are certain concessions that are made for efficiency. And so if you're trying, I think the argument for a blockchain is, well, what if you can't have trust? And I just don't believe that's possible. I think you can always form a group, even across the internet. You can form a group of people that maybe it's a community not of location, but a community of belief or whatever it is. You can always find a way to say, I have some amount of trust in this other person. And in the extreme cases where you don't, I still don't know that a blockchain,
let's put it this way. So the cost of trust is extremely high, right? Like you have to establish. No, seriously. Well, okay. In the case of, let's say, the stock market, the cost of trust is low because, well, no, it's actually high, but somebody else paid it. Somebody built a stock market and put all the plumbing so you could go online and buy some stocks. You're trusting in that system that someone else built, right? So the cost of trust in our current financial system is they're stealing on average 2% of your purchasing power every year. This past year is more like 50 or 60%.
Credit card system.
No. The global financial system or the U.S. financial system, take your pick. 80% of all U.S. dollars in circulation were printed in the last 18 months, I think. So that's the cost that you're paying, that deduction to the value of your purchasing power. That's the cost that you're paying for that trust. So it's not free.
Well, okay. If I'm paying 2% for trust,
no. How much have you tried to buy a steak recently?
Yes.
And it was about $50, whereas it used to be about $25.
My wife could answer that question, but I'm going to agree with you. Yes, she has been complaining about groceries every single time she's gone.
So that's the cost that you're paying, and you will continue to pay for that trust.
Okay, but this is ridiculous because, okay, well, what's my alternative solution? I'm going to have Bitcoin where I can trust that on any given Wednesday, its price is either 200% or 50% of what it was the last Wednesday, and that every single other cryptocurrency simply blindly follows the Bitcoin curve, regardless of what its utility is.
So you have to look at the broader context. The
please.
waning no, seriously. In the waning days of the Weimar Republic, the price of gold in Weimar marks had much the same volatility curve as Bitcoin has in dollars today.
Well, yeah. I mean, for any system of systems, there's going to be some fallibility in any of the systems at any given time. This is the birthday problem.
Your baseline is wrong, is what I'm saying. Your baseline, the baseline in terms of which you think is growing more volatile as it gets closer to collapse. And like people talk about this everything bubble of housing prices and asset prices. It's not that my house is intrinsically double the value that it used to be. It's that my dollar is half what it was.
Yeah,
I get that.
I think you got to acknowledge the problem, at least, AJ, for us to have some kind of a constructive conversation here. Because if your argument is that you don't see any problems with the current financial system or data ownership in general, then there's nothing to solve.
I see
and
problems.
Blockchain is a solution to that.
Exactly.
So I like that.
I want to briefly say that I think I diverge significantly from Nate and Rion in their line of argument here. I think there's a lot of utility here, but it's not because it ultimately our current system is like horribly corrupt. I think it has more to do with it, just that there's actually new utility here. That's my main.
It doesn't have to be corrupt. It just has to be uneconomic.
Yeah,
so I'm conceding to the point that you might have full trust in our leaders and those in charge of the financial system.
Well, I don't have
even if we do, even if there's zero
saying,
corruption, it still doesn't make it
an
economical system.
I do want to hear from Carl about some of the other applications, because that is kind of squarely up his.
My main point is just that I think we're being very hyperbolic and very just what's the word, extreme in our arguments here. Like, I think that it's possible for there to be both some corruption in a system, as well as a lot of people who are just doing their job, plodding along, and even people who you might totally not have any faith that they're trying to do what they think is right, but they're just ignorant and unaware of your perspective, right? Like, I honestly don't think, for the most part, now I think there is some, falsehood, some bad faith and deliberate deception involved in what some politicians do, but I think there's a lot of actual, good intent. Like, for example, I was just joshing a little bit about Elizabeth Warren, right? I actually think that in many cases she may actually be trying to fight for what she sees as consumer protections. But I just think that in many cases she's also very unaware of what's going on the other side of this debate, and thereby is like thinking that these things are threats, when in fact there's probably a good argument to be made for why many of the protections she's putting in place may actually be making the system worse. So,
and look, I'm not making any moral judgments about anybody's intent, except for the case of Nancy Pelosi. But just to be clear, I'm not talking about, I think there are certainly bad actors, but I'm more talking about like structural outcomes of the system, not necessarily any one individual.
Right.
But Carl, you were going to make some points about different use cases other than currency, which I did.
Yeah, if you have a moment, AJ, maybe we could talk about what beyond cryptocurrencies, what blockchains can do.
Yeah, I really do want to get beyond that, out there, because I will say this. I want to say one positive thing. All right. So assuming my original premise, all of this is Rube Goldberg machines. All of it. It's just Rube Goldberg machines that are fueled by snake oil. Assuming that, we have a few really great outcomes. One is that I can instantaneously get money from me to someone else on the other side of the globe in my US dollars through Dash. Thanks to Ryan, who's got me a little bit on the Dash bus. I can use Dash, can send it to somebody else, and they can cash it out in their currency all in about 10 minutes with very, very minimal risk of loss, in terms of it's going to cost less than a penny for the transaction, and maybe the ticker goes up by a little bit or down by a little bit on what the US dollar versus their currency or whatever. But I don't have to go through PayPal. If I trust the person, which again, trustless system, but no, I've got to trust the person. But if I trust the person and they trust me, I can send them money. I can get an acknowledgement that it's been received, is kind of a strong word, but that the address that they gave me is the address that is now owns that transaction. And it can be very quick. And I do like that. So even if it's a complete Rube Goldberg machine, it is at least useful in the sense that there is one use case that I have that it does solve better than my alternative solutions, such as using a wire transfer, which fails because they don't even verify and they fax things out and then they write it out by hand. And so you can never even tell if what you sent them in an email through the analog copies will make it on the other side, and then they don't know where the money went. Story for another time. But
a Rube Goldberg machine is only a Rube Goldberg machine to the degree that the complexity is unnecessary. That's the whole idea. of a Rube Goldberg machine is that it's all these working things and it's not really necessary. But what if those things are necessary?
All inventions start out less efficient than they ultimately become. And every new gradual improvement on that invention essentially is taking one step out of that Rube Goldberg machine, right?
Well, okay, so we took out the proof of work. Let's say that a modern blockchain that's serious isn't going to rely on proof of work. So we basically took out the most Rube Goldberg part, which is the complexity should increase as a feature, that it should become less efficient the more it's used. That's what proof of work was about. And so we've kind of taken that out. So now we have a new definition we can work with, and then maybe with that, we get to better applications.
Characterizing the way proof of work works there, it's not actually, when you say the complexity, you're talking about something different, and maybe we don't want to spend too much time on how proof of work actually functions, but
I think we don't, because it sounds like it's irrelevant in modern Web3.
Well, there are some folks who still argue that proof of stake is less secure than proof of work, and I think it's a very theoretical thing, because so far proof of stake blockchains have been thriving, and I don't think that whatever vectors of attack others have claimed exist are as significant as they claim. But there are some who still are making that argument. But anyway, yeah, I think it's probably worth moving on at this point.
All right. So what are some other? One thing that I'd like to do is talk about particularly
other uses for blockchain.
Well, yeah, I was going to say particularly there's smart contracts. Well, that's something that I want to pull up, because Matt, really who I work with, is really interested in what is there any use case for real data storage in terms of, I have, say, legal documents, or I have a birth certificate, a contract. Is there any application in the real world with that?
Yeah, let's talk about that briefly. So the way we got to the point where blockchains are now, or most modern blockchains, where they support what we call smart contracts, is that this happened with more than one group, but I think the Ethereum project is one of the most noteworthy ones. And Vitalik Buterin, the guy who was kind of really championing that project, started out by just like saying, well, wait, we've got Bitcoin and it's cool, and we've got people who are making altcoins, and they were typically making them by forking the Bitcoin code base and adding a little feature here and there. So like color coins was one of them, and there's lots of other kinds of notions of like how we can add like features to Bitcoin. And he had identified like 30 different additional features he wanted to add to Bitcoin. And the more he went along this path, the more someone kept adding another use case. They're like adding feature 31, feature 32. And they're finally like, wait, don't we have this notion of universal computing where like we can define almost any use case that we want using basic building blocks, right? Which is what Turing completeness means. The idea that a language is Turing complete if you can define pretty much any expressible, concept, set up any definable rules that will ultimately produce some outcome or result that you desire, right? And so, so that was the idea. Why can't we instead build a Turing complete blockchain that has a language that can be used, some sort of basic assembly language that can be used to define just about any logic you want? And then the transactions of this blockchain would no longer be simply debits and credits like they are for the most part on Bitcoin, right? In Bitcoin, all you're doing is debiting one account, crediting the other account. And so when you transfer value from one point in the globe to another, you're really just authorizing, signing a command with your private key that says, I authorize debiting my account and crediting this other person's account, right? So what they wanted to do instead was say, okay, I can sign with my private key a transaction, but that transaction will consist of actual assembly opcodes that will be executed by a virtual machine. So, for those of you who are familiar with computer science, this means things like add two values together, subtract one value from another, multiply, divide, jump from this line or this point in the memory to this point in the memory.
So if I were
Retrieve the values of some registers and store them somewhere else. Those are the basic building blocks of all programs.
so if I were to define this in a more practical use case, the thing that comes to mind is the recent attempt to group purchase a copy of the Constitution. And I don't know how that worked, but are we saying that there's some code saying, well, anytime some instruction comes in, allow that person in with their money. Once a certain condition has been reached, then divide some sort of value of the money against all the people that have put something in the pot, and then send that money to someone else. What's something like that?
I mean, that's a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. There's a couple of hops from, talking about smart contract opcodes and virtual machine execution to get there. That's maybe more complex than we have time for.
I mean,
help me understand
it fairly quickly, though. You could basically just say that after I have the ability to create an arbitrarily complex set of command instructions, program instructions, right? Which is what a smart, that is executed on a distributed network that's cryptographically validated and has some kind of consensus mechanism. That essentially is what these third generation blockchains are providing, right?
What was second generation?
Well, so I guess if you think of Bitcoin as the first generation, and then you think of some of these clones of Bitcoin as the second, then third generation is more Turing complete blockchains that are proof of stake, that allow for smart contract programming. But I mean, you could think of it as second if you want.
So when I think of a virtual machine, I think one, it has to run on a CPU. It's not a database. Now, databases have a feature that you can load a database and you can iterate across it and you can perform a calculation. But a database is a storage system. It's on a hard drive or
think of it like a stored procedure. You interact with the stored procedure or a trigger. It's stored in the database, right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, really think of it as a giant global computer, right? You have registers that you can access, you can both store into and retrieve from.
So it's literal CPU. It is a CPU architecture.
It absolutely is. And
yeah, and all the smart contract is code executing on many computers that agree to maintain that state.
So with Bitcoin, you just have a set of addresses that are debiting and crediting each other. And you have the notion of how to add more coins to the overall system, which is how the mining stuff works. But with Ethereum, which is kind of one of the first Turing complete blockchains, and all the others have a similar concept, they added the notion of state. So you can now store the state of this virtual machine from one block to the next. And also the notion that you can store an arbitrary set of opcodes in the form of a contract and deposit funds into that contract so that you can execute those opcodes. Because the way that they solve the problem of abuse of resources through runaway programs is by charging gas or charging a little bit of cryptocurrency for every single instruction that gets executed.
So are there blockchains that operate without a cryptocurrency?
They're all of them have some sort of core system of credit, right? So debits and credits. Some core way of tracking funds.
Public blockchains generally do have some sort of native coin. I can't think of any that don't.
What in the world would a non-public blockchain even mean? Sorry, I'm getting a little bit off tangent. That's come up a couple times now.
There's lots of blockchains that are just between certain companies. So whenever you have several organizations that need to interact with each other in some defined way, but none of them trusts one of them to be the sole gatekeeper of all the data, then private blockchains start to be important. And that was something I did often at AWS. Is I consulted with companies about how why it might benefit them to form some kind of consortium with other players and operators in a certain space so they could share data.
So I'm sorry again. Sorry, I'm taking us down a path from where we just were, and I'm taking us further. But so by our new definition of blockchain that we're arriving at, is Git a blockchain?
Well, I mean, you could think of it as a kind of distributed ledger in a way, but it's not necessarily a blockchain because it doesn't have blocks and cryptographic hashes that point from one block to the other.
It
Right.
does.
It doesn't
absolutely
have
does.
distributed consensus. So a
But-
distributed consensus is the thing that I would say defines it outside of a blockchain.
Okay, so the difference between Git being a Merkle tree, which is an extremely efficient linked list structure, and a blockchain, which I believe some of the blockchains are now Merkle trees, at which point many of my arguments about blockchains go out the window if we're saying that a Merkle tree can be a blockchain, which is part of what I'm asking here. But yeah, it does not have a consensus mechanism to define which of the trees and which of the prunings are verified state. So I agree with that.
Yeah. That's
But
fair.
it is a linked list of signatures. Each leaf node is signed, and if you change any node in between, it has the same feature of
It's a commit chain.
By the way,
And then one person can go and rebase the whole thing, and there goes your history.
But no, that's not true. That's
AJ,
not true.
You could share this link that I just posted with the crowd there on Twitch if you want. But this is actually
by the way, if anybody's got comments or questions, feel free to drop them in the chat on YouTube or Twitch. I may not get around to them right away because of the way the discussion flows, but I will get around to them.
Yeah. So if you and I have the only 2 copies of a repo, and I go rebase the whole thing, and you pull it, and then you run git GC, anything that you had that I rewrote, that is gone.
Well, but if when you put the argument at that place, you're basically saying, if you publish to a blockchain and I only pull it from block 500,000, and then you change something, then it's gone. You'd have to, you have to run the deletion.
To not do that is written into the protocol.
If you do that, you're not following the protocol anymore at that point, and you're no longer part of the network.
So AJ, here.
Tomato potato.
Blockchains are a combination. No. Blockchains are a combination of the idea of Git plus a consensus engine that says there's one canonical truth.
And that is interesting to me. That.
So
so if you want to say Git is a blockchain,
they've always been. You may not have understood that they were that.
Exactly.
They've always been that.
No. Because first and second gen were absolutely not that.
No, they are.
Absolutely. No, they're not. They are absolutely not.
No.
It doesn't take me 10 minutes to commit to Git. It doesn't take the energy resources of an entire country to make a commit on Git.
The time it takes to commit or to pull or whatever is not an essential attribute of Git.
Yeah, the first car only went, a mile an hour and broke down after 10 minutes. Like
you could
the 10-minute thing.
You could run Git over. Sorry, go ahead.
The 10-minute thing is the process of consensus. That's why there's that latency in blockchains and that work that's required, that mistake that's required to make a Git chain into a blockchain. Or those terms, I don't like them, but
I think what you're saying, Ryan, that's part of the protocol. But it is important to point out that 10-minute thing is only one consensus protocol.
No, I get that. I get that.
Also,
I actually said consensus, not proof of work. I said there's a consensus mechanism that people that are running the nodes on the network agree to that define the canonical chain of truth. And that's the whole process of consensus. And in proof of work, that consensus is built upon the idea of doing a lot of work And in proof of stake, that consensus is built on the idea of proving that you own some of the coins. So, which eliminates most of the work. 99.999% of the work is eliminated with proof of stake. But again, as Carl said, that's debatable whether proof of stake actually solves this problem in a way that's secure.
But even
because for the layperson, proof of stake means the richest person in the room wins.
No. It's better to describe it this way, that they're trying to align the incentives of the network in a way that the person who would have the most to lose if they were to engage in fraudulent behavior would be the person that also would be in charge of securing the network. And so what happens is, based on how many coins you've been allocated, you receive the opportunity to produce a new block proportional to that number of coins you hold. So it's still random, but you would be called on more frequently to validate new blocks if you have more coins, right? And the idea is that if you decide to cheat, there's still in proof of stake, you still have other nodes that are basically corroborating the work of the validator and saying this validator did correctly or they cheated, right? And if the validator cheats, they can still be what's called slashed, which means their coins get taken away. So there are mechanisms for preventing fraud, but the point is that those who have the most coins also have the most to lose if fraud occurs, because then the perceived value of that chain has been diminished, right?
Because proof of stake actually means you are staking those coins to validate the transactions, and you are penalized, like Carl said, if you get it wrong.
That's right. Yep.
And then
there is a kernel of truth to what you said, AJ. If somebody can gain a majority of the value in the network, in other words, if there's a super rich person that wanted to attack a very small market cap proof of stake coin, they could potentially try to buy up all of the other or at least half of the coins, or I'm not sure exactly what percentage.
Well,
that's the primary argument against proof of stake and for proof of work.
Well, I was actually just going to say they're the same. That's one and the same, because the benefit of proof of stake is the richest people have the most voting power, but without actually having to burn the money and increase the carbon emissions. Whereas proof of work, you actually have to burn the money. You literally burn the coal in order to produce it.
So are you talking about the sort of energy ESG argument against proof of work?
I think so.
So that's basically all ignorance and or propaganda.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it all is, but I think there's a lot of problems with the argument. Like, the main thing is
making that argument.
the main thing is that much of the current electricity that's being used for mining Bitcoin is coming from renewables, and it's electricity that would otherwise have been wasted, actually would have been wasted. Like that, unless it gets used right at the point of its wherever there's extra, it won't. No, there's nothing to put it into. There are no batteries or other things to put it into.
Yeah, so the grid. Hang on. The grid as it exists today loses about 60% of its production to storage and distribution. And just to completely blow up the narrative. So do y'all remember what happened to Texas last year? Their power grid, right? Y'all remember that?
Yeah, there's a lot of debate about that.
Just this week, Governor Abbott met with a consortium of Bitcoin miners to try to help Texas solve their energy problems. Now, what sense does that make if Bitcoin is causing all of these all kinds of energy problems?
Yeah, no, but I just want to add, though, that there are some regions where, because of like inherent inefficiencies in the way their whole economic systems have been set up, and the way there are sort of like built-in subsidies for certain sources of energy, they sometimes do incentivize polluting forms of energy that end up going into Bitcoin mining. I'm not saying that is the majority of Bitcoin mining, but some portion of Bitcoin mining still does burn fossil fuels. So it's not perfect, but I think it's a much more nuanced perspective on what's actually going on than this narrative of Bitcoin is like destroying the environment. Because in many cases, Bitcoin is totally running on renewable energy that would otherwise have been wasted.
Okay.
Or like natural gas flaring or things that would
Yeah,
otherwise
yeah,
be
exactly.
totally
Yep.
uncaptured and actually emitting.
Yeah,
If we want a really
exactly.
cogent, concise argument on this, there's a documentary called This Machine Greens. It's about 40 minutes. It totally turns the Bitcoin ESG narrative on its head.
Okay, This Machine Greens. Do you want to link me to that, and I'll plop
Sure.
it in the channel?
Yep.
I also, while we're plugging things, I just want to add a plug for a book called Money, the Unauthorized the Unauthorized Biography. And
Yeah,
the
put a
reason
link.
for that, what's that?
Grab a link for it, and I'll put it in.
Yeah, okay. I didn't want to favor a certain bookstore over another, but anyway, um,
It's
the
okay. We all use Amazon.
the main reason I share this is because actually many crypto enthusiasts talk about crypto as just like money, just that's all it is. I think there are properties that money has that crypto does not have, and some properties crypto may have that money does not, or whatever. And so I think there's some differences there, and sometimes we get a little confused when we treat crypto as the same thing as money. I think it's not
Well,
exactly
hang
that.
on. I mean, if we're going to talk about that, there are what, four properties: medium of exchange, store of value, unit of account, and there's a fourth one that I'm struggling to remember.
Yeah, but those are some of the major points. But what's great about this book is it also talks about how like debt issuance and management and sovereignty has a lot to do with money. So if you look at the history of money, it almost always is there's some sovereign body that ultimately decides what money is, right? And in that sense, crypto doesn't necessarily have that same property. But I can't. I'm failing
Well,
to
that's
recall.
not a property of money, and if we're talking about sovereign fiat currency, which is the paper dollars that we all carry around in our wallets, that's a fairly novel invention. That is very, very new in the scheme of history.
No, but this book that I'm talking about actually goes back to the earliest history of money that we are aware of. So anyway, I think it's worth reading for its more nuanced exploration of what has been money throughout human history and drawing important distinctions that are often missed by even the experts, right? Like they point out that even Adam Smith's definition of money fails to account for many ways that money has been used prior to our modern era, right? So anyway, I just think it's worth reading. I mean, you may quibble with some of its points, but I think it adds to the debate.
Okay.
That's interesting. I'll
So
take a look at it.
I want to wind us back a little bit, and then wind us back a little bit more. So first, the proof of work. There's proof of stake. I've heard of proof of service, and I think there's at least one other one, right?
There's
Lots
proof of
more. Proof of
history.
elapsed time.
Go ahead, Carl. Sorry.
Yeah, proof of elapsed time. There's like which I think is similar to the consensus mechanism Solana uses, but yeah, there's
I,
several ways of arriving at consensus. There's the Avalanche protocol, which is a novel consensus mechanism.
I think I heard of that at that DAO meetup. Is that what they were talking about, Ryan? I heard an
Yeah,
avalanche.
I think somebody mentioned it. But do you know, AJ, what all of those things are doing? Why are they proving anything?
I have no idea how proof of time means anything. I understand what proof of storage does, and it sounds like a terrible concept on 100,000 levels, so I don't want to talk about it unless someone has an argument as to how proof of storage would ever be useful. But I'm interested in hearing proof of service, proof of time, and maybe a 30 seconds of what the heck is Avalanche, because that just sounds cool, I guess.
So
Maybe
you think
that's
that proof of storage is useful in a regime where all of our centralized services are censoring data constantly?
and
I
maybe
think
you're thinking of a different proof of storage, but I was thinking of like Filecoin and some other storage protocols that basically um, force a node to prove that it's actually storing data that you want it to store on your behalf. Is that not what you're talking about?
Maybe. My understanding of a proof of storage mechanism is basically it's just uber expensive and unreliable, because the only way to get media that's large enough to be able to do any amount of work is in the realm of dozens of terabytes, which is going to cost lots of money and be rotational drives that are going to be uh, basically they're going to break, because the constant need to rehash files over and over again to verify that they exist will cause so much thrashing that it can't handle it. So then your alternative to go to SSDs is becoming less than 10x expensive, but at the realm of dozens of terabytes is 10x expensive.
So
Okay,
I
so
think the main
AJ,
point-
AJ,
Go
you're
ahead.
I think you're getting too much. I know you love like to go down the rabbit holes, but I think one of the reasons why you may still have this deep skepticism of blockchains is that you're not focusing on the fundamentals, which is ironic for me to say to you because you usually focus on the fundamentals.
I
And the
guess, well,
fundamental idea of this proof of X, whatever X is, that's what I want to know if you understand. Why does somebody have to prove anything?
well,
What are they
so
proving in order to do?
let me say what I think my ideal solution would be in most cases.
Okay.
Right? Is that there's a network of people that have some degree of, rather than everyone has mutual disinterest, that within a group, most people in the group have some sort of mutual interest, or they must have some sort of mutual interest at some level.
What kind of group are we talking about here?
It doesn't matter, any human group.
Any arbitrary group of people. Okay.
There's some sort of mutual interest, and because of that, if we all hold private keys and we all sign messages, if we distribute the message and we all have each other's public keys, so everybody that wants to do any transaction with anyone else or be part of the proving system for anyone else, you would just have the storage of the public keys. And you only need the public keys of people that you're interested in or the people that you're interested in verifying for. And any transaction that happens, only the people that are interested parties in the transaction need to keep a history of the transaction. Because
That's where you're wrong. That's where you're wrong.
Okay, but let me finish. Because we can prove that if I have a history of the transaction that I'm interested in, by virtue that the person who signed it has released their public key to all interested parties, not necessarily in that specific transaction. If they create a bogus key just for that transaction, I would reject that transaction, because I'd say, this is not your public key that you've verified with others. This is your key that you're sending me a new bogus key just for me. This seems fishy, right? But if I could get whatever transaction it is, if I can just get a record of that and store it, and I would probably want to propagate it if there's an automated system for me to propagate it among people that I trust. I'd want to propagate it so that there's some backups. And that would be an extremely efficient, extremely secure system that any transaction, no matter what it is, you could verify that the person that initiated it and the person that received it are the correct people by virtue of simply sharing public keys and interested parties making backups.
Okay. So the issue is here. Why am I getting an echo?
It's Nate. Nate didn't put headphones in. We all know it's him.
Okay.
I have a hotkey.
Making sure it's not me. The issue is we're all dealing with a shared resource that we all have interest in. In the case of cryptocurrencies, in the case of NFTs or whatever else, those are different cases. Okay, but if you and I want to send a message to each other, then yeah, you're right. All we need is public key cryptography or something that I know that a message is coming from you. But the issue with cryptocurrency is that you're not just transacting arbitrary messages. You're transacting messages that change the state of a shared resource. In the case of Bitcoin, you're transacting messages that change the state of the shared resource called the supply of BTC. And everybody needs to know that transaction, it was valid in the sense that I wasn't just making up my own money and transferring it to you, AJ, because Nate's got an interest in knowing that, because Nate's dealing with the same money supply. So that's where this global consensus is required, and that's why you kind of need to have more than just classic public key cryptography. You need to also have this consensus mechanism of
and if
how
you want to talk about
state
it,
change.
oh, sorry, continue.
No, go ahead.
If you want to talk about it in a concise way, the two problems that you're grappling with are the Byzantine generals problem and the double spend problem. This distributed consensus algorithms were basically derived to deal with the double spend problem. I can't give you $100 and then Ryan $100. That same $100, otherwise the system breaks, right? So how do you do that without trusting a single centralized third party?
Okay, so let's first of all, this is a different problem than so this is one specific problem. This is not a general problem. So let's say that I'm bought into the idea of, if we get rid of proof of work and we're doing proof of stake, and proof of stake means that interested parties, this is part of my whole argument. Proof of stake is interested parties taking part in something, and the incentivization structure is around value that they believe in. So if we're saying that we had a blockchain that's based on proof of stake, and the purpose of it is transacting money, and it can be efficient, it can be global, I'm actually in. I'm convinced.
Okay, I think we can get you there. Because
go ahead, sir.
No, you go ahead, Carl.
So I was just going to say that also efficiency is more of a continuum rather than a binary, right? So we're discovering ways of improving the efficiency in areas that matter to us. That doesn't mean we're violating the cap theorem. We're just shuffling around those trade-offs in a way that allows us to get more useful work done. So, for example, we're now some blockchains are emerging that allow for faster finality. Avalanche is one example.
What does Avalanche mean?
So, I mean, I can't.
Avalanche is a poor man's Dash consensus mechanism. I'm just kidding.
Anyway, it's a consensus mechanism, and there's a blockchain called Avalanche that was built on this type of consensus. But it's a rapid way of achieving some sort of consensus around many nodes about what the outcome actually was, right? And I don't want to get into the precise mathematics of how Avalanche consensus works, only to say that the way it was designed allows for you to achieve finality faster. So rather than waiting 10 minutes or even several hours for many blocks to go by before you decide that, basically in earlier blockchains, if there was always the possibility that later on someone could produce a result that could potentially invalidate the others, or could somehow prove to the rest of the network that they should have followed this other outcome rather than the outcome that they had been following. And so it's very common for merchants and others who are trying to validate that a Bitcoin transaction has actually happened to wait maybe half an hour to an hour before they consider that transaction to truly have landed, right, and be final.
I forget what that's called, but it's 6 blocks. Is it? They say the 6 block rule. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean that's one way. There's various levels of conservativeness in terms of how many blocks you want to wait for, but with some new consensus mechanisms, it's no longer necessary to do that because they don't have this notion of alternate branches or orphan branches or uncles, as they're sometimes called in Ethereum. And so they function a little differently. And therefore, when a transaction actually is marked final, you can just already know that it's final. And that can be achieved in a matter of seconds in some blockchains.
Like Dash.
Yeah, like Stellar, Dash, Cardano, those can all achieve finality in at sub-second intervals.
And they
Bitcoin even has the Lightning Network, which is a what's called a layer 2 solution. You could think of it as a stack like TCP/IP. A single TCP packet is unreliable, but in a whole network stack, it's like we achieve reliability at different protocol levels, right? So Bitcoin and the Lightning Network kind of work in a similar way. Where, I mean, just the other day I saw a tweet where some guy moved over $1 billion of Bitcoin for less than a quarter in within a couple of seconds.
Yeah, cool. JJ, where do you want to go next with this? How much longer are we gonna debate for?
So we've got let's see, time on the clock right now is we're at an hour and 40 minutes, and I think it would be good to kind of wrap up, but I'd love to continue another session. I think I really want to get towards more about I don't know, there's a lot of areas I'd like to go.
We didn't really talk, if I could spend just a few more minutes, we didn't talk a whole lot about what you can do with Turing complete blockchains, right?
That's not clear to me at all.
So the main point is that now, instead of merely supporting debits and credits or transfer of value, we can support arbitrarily complex business rules that we want to enforce with cryptography. So now, for example, let's say I want to create some kind of organization that functions according to certain rules, and that when people interact with this organization, if they can call methods on the organization, essentially, they can submit data to it and receive results, and those results will be corroborated by every member of the network. The entire network will agree that those results have been reached, right? Essentially, what you're doing is you're allowing the outcome of an application to be agreed upon by the entire network rather than just by one person running on their individual machine, right? So now we can engage in complex agreements with each other and interactions, and everybody can agree that those interactions have occurred according to the rules, whatever those rules happen to be.
And that's the critically important part. Like, I don't have to trust Carl. I don't have to trust AWS. That contract code is public and inspectable, and it's going to work exactly the way I think every time I interact with it.
Well, it's going to work exactly the way it's written, not exactly the way that you think, which has been millions and millions and millions of dollars of either scams or people playing by the rules, right? Depending on which way you want to look at it.
I think there is an important issue, which is people have talked about smart contracts using the term code as law.
Yeah, I heard that.
And what's interesting about it is that this is both a good and a bad term. Good in the sense that in some ways, yes, whatever the code says should happen does happen. Bad in the sense that some people have assumed, or probably a little naively assumed, that this will eliminate the need for courts at all, because if it's written in the contract, then too bad, you wrote a bad contract, and if something you didn't want to happen happens, that's the end of it. And I would say, actually, if you create a smart contract that is going to be used by individuals in certain jurisdictions where certain laws actually apply, you might still be held liable for creating a system that essentially enables others to break the law, right? So now that is still a matter for debate, but what many organizations are doing to try to actually do something practical and useful with this is that they are trying to first set up a system, a legal framework for their organization to operate in a Web3 context, and then making sure that their smart contracts match that legal framework and don't attempt to do anything outside of that they don't want to support necessarily, right? They feel like they need to abide by certain rules and laws. But I'd say, generally speaking, this notion of being able to create contracts that allow people to interact with each other and do useful things, that this allows for disintermediation, which is the idea that you no longer have to have a middleman in between you and the other people that you want to interact with, but you could create systems that allow people to, for example, trade shares with each other or sell items or do any number of useful activities by following the guardrails of the smart contract, rather than by having to go through some party like Facebook or Wall Street or whatever that's taking a huge cut and that is actually extracting value to an unnecessary degree from the ecosystem in ways that cause harm.
So,
right?
Two things here. One, we've got we're hitting on smart contract platforms. That also on Twitch, Matt's asking about practical applications, and this is where I want to steer us to. So the first thing then is there's this concept of the oracle, which is this magical fairy that communicates between the real world and the blockchain, is always honest, and so we can know that because the magical oracle fairy has said something, that therefore it's true, and we can trust it because it's on the blockchain because the oracle fairy put it there. And that's one of the issues I have with the idea of, can a smart contract at all be can it at all be practical? Because at the end of the day, not only do I need to know that you shipped the item, but I need to, when I receive the item, know that the item that's in the box is the item that I ordered and not something else that weighs the same, because the oracle can tell you, oh, the package was the right weight. The package went out, and then at the end of the day, the oracle is, of course,
there are
a human.
huge number of applications that are extremely practical and valuable that don't involve oracles in any way, first of all.
Right. There's actual useful data that is actually generated on the blockchain and stays there, that doesn't have to come from an oracle at all. But even, sorry, let's pause for a moment. Oh, keep going. Okay. But also, even for oracles, it's really important to point out, as Ryan said in the comments, that was a straw man oracle or a straw oracle, because the way most oracle networks actually work is that they don't trust a single source of truth, but instead create an incentivized network that very closely resembles a blockchain of oracles, each of which can be slashed if they share oracle data in an invalid way. And so you create the same kinds of hardened consensus mechanisms for validating oracle information as well, right? So, and then also we just have lots of more applications being built on blockchain that are bringing data natively to the blockchain that hasn't existed before. So there's not even a need for oracles in some cases, because the blockchain is starting to have native data sources that provide. Sure. Okay, let me give you two great examples. You could have a network of oracles that is providing weather data, right? I'll give you three. You could also have a network of oracles that's providing satellite imagery. You could also have a network of oracles providing. So pricing data. There's lots of oracles providing pricing data to blockchains right now, and providing it in a robust way that is resistant to fraud.
Okay, people didn't hear me, so I'm going to repeat what I said, but it should make sense in context anyway. Apparently, I hit the mute button. I forgot to unmute on the stream. Yeah, you can hear me now. I know. 15 seconds, you'll be able to hear me again. You'll be good. Okay, so I asked. Now I forgot what I asked. I said
you're asking something about oracles. Oh, what is a real world example of an oracle?
Not gaming, not gambling, because gaming is a complete virtual world. You can do stuff in gaming. There is opportunities in gaming because you're creating a fake world.
For smart contracts or for oracles?
For smart contracts. So not gaming, not gambling, and then ideally not self-referential, meaning if the purpose of the blockchain is to predict or if the purpose of the contract is to do something about the money that's on the chain, then it's a closed system, and I don't know how that relates back out to the real world.
All right, I got a real practical, simple one for you. Go to stablegains.com. I use it. It's an app. It lets me plug my bank account into the Anchor protocol. And through the Anchor protocol, I earn 15% APY compounding daily. That is a very practical use case for me. And that goes, well, for you,
what does this do, though?
Sorry, Stablegains?
Yeah.
So that allows you to plug your bank account into the Anchor protocol, which is all smart contracts.
What's an Anchor protocol?
The Anchor protocol is all smart contracts.
So let me get this straight. Connect my bank, make money. Like just the two-step process.
Yep.
Connect bank, profit. You're beating the memes.
Yeah. It's great.
But you're saying this super seriously, and
would you agree, AJ, that like just let's say a stock ticker, like a pricing feed of various prices that are not part of the blockchain, like let's say of the traditional stock market or of commodities and futures, that having that information might be useful in a blockchain context?
So can we get outside of the realm of money, though? Because we said, okay, let's talk about something that's not cryptocurrency. And then we said, okay, we'll talk about smart contracts. But now we're back at money again.
Weather data. Weather
data is not useful.
Well, of course it is. There are billions of dollars going back and forth.
The window and I can see. I don't need a blockchain to tell me it's sunny outside.
Whether it's useful to you or not doesn't mean it's not useful. There are billions of dollars going right now in the shipping industry and logistics all about weather data.
But they need a blockchain for that? They can't just call up headquarters and say, hey, do you know if it's sunny over there?
AJ, if useful activity is occurring on the blockchain, then yes, we need freaking weather data on the blockchain.
Say that one more time.
If useful activity is occurring on the blockchain, then yes, we need weather data on the blockchain. You're saying, well, why do we need a blockchain for that? What we're saying is just that useful things can be done on chain.
But I mean, okay, again, where there is an advantage to a traditional system. I mean,
my goodness. So I used to work in fintech, and I would walk into these, fancy brokerages with their high arch ceilings and marble floors and countertops. Where do you think all of that money comes from? Now,
now we're switching away from weather
system where I'm earned 15% a year on my deposits.
Okay, and
that's
a useful, practical application.
Right, but AJ was asking for non-financial stuff, and I was pointing out that the shipping and logistics industry, can benefit from several blockchain features, and that they need weather data as well as lots of other data like flights.
That's great, and I completely agree. But think about just financial services. That's not money. It's services built on top of money, but it's extremely useful. It's extremely valuable. It's uncensorable. And for us in the West, yeah, sure, access to financial services is taken for granted. If you're in Venezuela, if you're in Afghanistan, if you're anywhere without a local bank branch or easy access to Wi-Fi, forget it.
So I'm going to...
Yeah, I mean, but if I could boil it down, AJ, I'm just seeing you constantly just throw out things that you claim are not useful that are actually useful to many people, even who just happen to have different use cases than you.
All right. This is where I'm having trouble. Okay, and I realize that from your perspective, I'm overreacting, but hear me out here. Figuring out what the weather is not a hard problem. I mean, I'm fundamentally not understanding why it would have any bit other than, okay, I can call you up on the telephone or I can send a message via the blockchain. Both are methods of communication that are valid. By the way, I brought Josue in here for a second because he was in the chat saying a couple examples. Wait, Josue, wait. We're not ready for you.
But AJ, just really quick before we drop this topic, I just want to say that even if you're right now thinking of one instance where you might want to call someone to tell them what the weather is, but AJ, think about weather in all of its ramifications in all the ways that it influences so many things that people do on the globe that are useful to us. All right. And
I'm not part of logistics, so you have got something in your head that I think is probably really valuable. I'm blank here.
and
Look,
all I'm saying is,
AJ, I
I'm just
think
saying,
you're
have more
arguing.
imagination, AJ. Have more imagination. You
Look,
know?
that's hard. I understand that, imagining things that you're not familiar with is hard. I think you're arguing in good faith, but instead of continuing to constantly pivot on to different topics, let's figure out, okay, what's that core list of issues that's going to allow you to, accept Jesus into your heart, so to speak.
Yeah, so I'm the atheist up against the proselyters here, but each have a slightly different religion. So I yeah, it's just I guess it's hard for me because this is what happens every single time that I have this discussion. Okay, so actually I've accepted Jesus into my heart about, okay, proof of stake for transmitting a currency that is not an investment. This is the tricky part because the price. But anyway, I can do a transaction across the globe. There's no better way for me to do that than Dash, for me personally. Of the things that I've ever used, Dash is the best way for me to get money across the globe. So I'm with you there. You've got me as a convert on that one thing. With, okay, there is a use case for this. It doesn't have to be a Rube Goldberg machine. So you're winning, all right. But now I'm saying, what's a practical application other than money? And I can't understand. So we're on a different topic because we're on a different topic, but I can't understand how weather is a hard problem. So for example, if you said, if you need to call your grandma, you can use the blockchain. That would make no sense to me because what's wrong with the phone? And that's what I'm asking here. Why would somebody need weather data that they can't use the satellites and the phone and the internet?
Okay, but AJ, let's just back up for a second and just point out that all of this started because we were talking about oracles.
Yes.
We were talking about a very specific instance where you were saying we need data on blockchain, and you were asking for a non-financial application where we needed some data, where some useful data should be brought to blockchain. And I was trying to give you a real-world example that is absolutely, I guarantee you, of great value.
Go a little further. Help me understand.
And so what you're saying,
why this is better.
Right, but the analogy, all I need to share is an analogy. You're basically saying, okay, I can't think of a useful consumer application for this one thing that you told me, therefore it's not valuable at all. That's a fallacy.
I have to.
All right, Josue, can we give Josue a minute?
And well, if the problem is finding applications that are super useful for people, are not money, and are on the blockchain and work better on the blockchain than in any other thing, that's the thing, right?
Yeah, I'm looking for stuff that's not completely artificial, not completely artificial, so not gambling.
But I have a point to make afterwards.
The first one is DVPN, or Sentinel Network. It's a decentralized VPN that for once is way more secure than any other VPN that you can find anywhere, because it's not possible for people to track you down and to find that you're using a VPN, or to the VPN company to take your data. It's not possible on this VPN.
What's this thing called again?
DVPN. DVPN. Yeah.
Do you want to drop it in the chat?
And it's a super cheap VPN.
Is it Sentinel? Is it
Sentinel.com? It's from Sentinel. It's super fast. I have it in my phone. It's all around the globe. A lot of people are using it. People is getting money with them, but you can pay for it, or actually you can actually have it for free right now, because the incentive program is in this position where people can actually use it without harming the monetary value of the coin, and it's faster than any VPN that I've used ever, and it's proven by me. Like I've seen the code every single time, and it's safer than any other VPN.
So rather than proof of work, this is proof of bandwidth, essentially.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're, but this isn't. This is more an incentivization structure, which I think this is a whole different I don't know. Somebody
Yeah,
else
no,
other
you're
than
right,
me.
you're right.
Hang on.
Wait,
Here's my
Are we
pushback to
converging
this
or
whole
diverging?
line of questioning is you can absolutely turn the world upside down without ever stepping foot outside financial services.
Okay.
And
But let me
anyways,
also point out that this thing that Josue is just talking about is actually an example of how there are many other service layers besides just what blockchain can do, right? That are
But
being
this,
incentivized.
so to be clear though, what we're all right. So maybe it seems that everything converges on basically money. Everything basically converges on money because even with this, the VPN, what you're actually doing, the VPN is not on the blockchain. Some sort of mechanism to determine whether you're a seeder or a leecher.
No,
is being stored.
the relay system on the middle, the relay system on the middle is part of the VPN because it's part of the blockchain because every single kind of the anonymized transactions that occur in the relay thing are go to the blockchain so we can help anonymize people by moving the nodes they're using and also by taking into account how many gigabytes of your bandwidth you are giving to other people. Because of course, no one is going to work for free. I don't want to give my internet service for free. Of course, they have to pay for it. So there are services. Someone has to pay for it. In case of Facebook and stuff, we don't pay because they're just grabbing our data. In here, no one's grabbing our data, so we need to use money. But money is not the main thing in this one thing. That's what you asked for.
And in Facebook, the product is you.
Yeah, in here, because you're not the product, someone has to pay. In this moment, clients are not paying. It's just being rebalanced. It's a weird, complicated economic thing that why right now not all the clients are paying. Like you can be a client and use it for free up to a certain point. But anyways.
Okay, so can I think we're all agreed, especially because we got the side chat here with people that are in the live or watching can see too. So we're all in agreement that at least here in this circle that the only real practical application of blockchain technology is if the pivot point has to do with something that's pretty darn similar to money. So we're trying to control that what you're putting in
value.
And
it's
I
really
don't disagree.
value.
I don't disagree with your characterization. I think I know what you're trying to get to. But could
well,
I try?
rephrase it.
Could I try to rephrase it?
Yes, please.
I think
please.
It's not the only thing, but that they all share one thing in common, and that is that some type of value is being transferred between parties, right? Is that better? Does that make more sense? Because each one of these use cases has every other things that are happening besides just transfer of value. Like Josue is talking about this example where like actual services are being exchanged, but somehow they have to account for the value that's being exchanged, the value of those services, right?
I mean, I understand AJ in this thing where he just says that we're always implying money, but the thing is, everything in the internet have been having using money ever since internet was created. Just
Yeah.
that the money was moving between companies, and now it's moving between all of the clients and the people.
That's
Money is
really
going down
important. That's
because
really important.
yeah, it's a thing where we have data that is the most valuable asset that we have in the world right now, and the data has been traded by a lot of companies for a long time, and now data is being traded by the people that create the data and people that consume that data or people that saves that data. That's the move. That's
So-
why it appears as we are always talking about money, but it's not necessarily. It's just the same things, but done in a different way. And now that it's a different way, and there's not a company, then you need to make a
Yeah,
value.
if I could summarize, Josue, what I think you're saying is that the previous internet protocols that existed did not allow value transfer. Therefore, value was extracted at higher layers of the protocol. So in other words, only large companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, etc. had the resources and capital to deploy the infrastructure first and then extract value from the infrastructure that they had deployed at higher layers, right? But now blockchain and Web3 enable value to be transferred at the protocol layer, right?
Exactly.
Right. So AJ, as a technologist, you understand the value of network effects, right? That's what allows the Googles, the Facebooks, the Ubers of the world to win. So that goes right back to that very first part of the conversation about a globally readable and writable database. That's that network effect that allows value to be distributed and decentralized rather than centralized and accruing to one central body or organization.
Yeah, I've heard it described as that in Web 2, which was social media, right? In Web 2, data gets concentrated within private corporations, right? But in Web 3, data gets or value gets concentrated in the network itself, right? So when someone creates a service in Web 3, they are essentially forced to make it interact with other services and to make it composable with other services. And so what happens is any value they add ends up landing in the entire network and not just in some private walled garden like it does in Web 2,
And
right?
also, repeating stuff that has been made in Web 2 for no reason in Web 3 makes no sense. That's why value moving things are the things that are going to be here in the Web 3. Like, we have no reason why do stuff that can be doing Web 2 in the Web 3. That's why you will see a lot of times you won't find a lot of free stuff that doesn't give you anything, because if we don't gain anything by moving into Web 3, then why move it to Web 3? That's why a lot of value moving stuff is in Web 3.
Yeah. So one quick example is that like someone could create a game that's a Web3 game, and the assets that players earn in that game could be transferable and traded outside of just the game.
So
Um,
I actually get that use case. It's Pokemon trading cards, but digitally. You know, you except it's a little bit weird because a Pokemon card, if it's forged, there's a tell. You know, it doesn't feel right in your hand. Whereas a digital asset, if you just take a copy of it, who cares
well,
whether or not the signature verifies?
but wouldn't you argue that cryptographic verification is even stronger
Oh,
than just whether the card looks legit to you?
Well, when you open up the JPEG file or when you render the 3D model, you get the exact same representation whether or not the signature verifies. There's no loss in fidelity.
Right,
well,
but
well,
the proof is around who owns it, AJ. That's the
yeah.
critical difference.
Which
You can prove that you own that.
Oh,
Let me.
I have
Yeah,
an
if you-
well, let
case
me
for you, John.
hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. So first, I need to catch up on comments real quick here because we've got a ton of them, and I just want to scan through, and most of them probably aren't even relevant anymore. But let me just do this real quick, and then let's get back. And we probably do need to wrap up, but I want to. I don't know. What can we go longer? I could probably go another 20 minutes.
I got to bail in a few minutes here, but yeah, I think we're due for a follow up on maybe a set of topics over a period of time.
All right, I'm up for it.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
so
I could do something. I could do 10 more minutes, but probably not much longer than that.
okay, well, let me just get through some comments. Let's we've got this recorded so we can kind of put a pin in where we're at or finish up whatever that last thought was. But let me get through the
If I
comments
could
real
add
quick.
one little teeny thought experiment about the last thought, that is that a lot of people talk about this notion of like, you know, identity or like that the JPEGs are the same or whatever. And all I would say is that right now I could contract an artist in China to produce an absolutely like indistinguishable replica of the Mona Lisa, but they would do it for a lot less money, and the value of what they gave to me would not be anywhere near the value of the version that's in the Louvre. And it has nothing to do with the actual atoms of those two objects. It has everything to do with the provenance of that pattern of information, right? And so what I'm saying is that the real art world is just as crazy and weird as the world that everyone's
Oh
complaining
my
about.
goodness, you have no idea.
Well, that I agree with, but then we get into the then you're into this kind of strange moral realm because it's so here's a pin. that Mozart used to write his work. You pass it around the room and everyone reveres it. And then you say, actually, just kidding, that was the pen that Hitler used to sign off on deaths of Jews. And so suddenly the value of the pen based on perceived information changes drastically
Only
when
if
the
they're
fidelity of the pen changed none at all.
Right, but all I'm saying, AJ, is that all of the complaints that people are lodging against this kind of weird notion of ownership that is happening in the NFT space, not that there isn't lots of fraud in the NFT space, but this particular argument, I would say, applies just as much to the real world collectible space, whether it's art or other.
I have a comparable use case for NFT.
Wait! I need to do these comments real quick. I need to. We must give a little bit of fan service here. All right. So Mario says whatever my man AJ says is the truth for me. All right,
you
Mario.
didn't have to include that one.
He's not getting the idea of decentralized trust.
Ego stroking.
Hold on. Josue, who's now with us, says soon we'll see. El Dinero says decentralized VPN is a true solution. Mario says, okay, we have money stuff in a VPN. Other uses, please. El Dinero says security, which that's kind of broad and nondescript. Mario says, I think the time it takes to approve a transaction is the issue with the blockchain. Mario, go back, watch this from the beginning. We kind of had a slow start, but we addressed that.
If you want another use case that's totally different, I'd love to share it real fast.
Well, wait, let me get through these other, but yes, I do want you to do that. So thus the usability for, thus limiting the usability for other applications, but that's proof of work. And so we're getting into a more nuanced discussion here. Nuance is the word for, forget what you know. Okay. So, Uncle Matthew says disintermediating the infrastructure companies. That's fairly interesting. El Dinero says Mysterium VPN. I guess that's another VPN. Mario says Dinaro. We all agree it's good for money in VPN. Tell me something else. El Dinero says special project around game assets that you could transfer around other games and whatnot. Fractal. So we kind of touched on that too. Uncle Matthew says list off the top 3 applications of blockchain that aren't directly tied to money movement or financial services. I think that's going to be the halting problem here. Or just the number 1. I want the AJ chain. What does that even mean?
Let's go.
It means a crappy blockchain that's skeptical about everything.
I think actually he was watching since the beginning. I think he may have been referring to what I said, where we just share with a group of people that we are interested parties in. The more. I think that's what he's actually talking about there.
Well, look, NFTs.
Oh no, he clarified. All transactions are approved by AJ. Not many transactions are getting through. That's not a high throughput chain. Nice and interesting conversation, Ishan says. Hoping to see this panel more often on this topic. Okay, so I think this is an interesting topic. Everybody wants us back. Let's end off on a high note with what are your top 1, or if you've got more, and then by all means do it, but what's your top 1 that's not directly tied to money movement or value that sounds a lot like money? So meaning horse trading, not money movement, not horse trading.
I'll share one really fast that isn't necessarily like my favorite, but I think it's just fascinating and interesting. And some other time we can share another one. But I would just mention the Foam blockchain network, which decentralizes the GPS system, right? So GPS right now depends on these satellites that are orbiting the Earth that actually are really high value targets in any time of war, for example. And we now have billions and billions, trillions actually, of dollars of industry that depend on GPS signals for tracking everything that's happening on the globe. And what this network does is incentivizes the creation of beacons that actually provide a radio signal whose location has been pre-verified, and it just incentivizes node operators to create beacons all over the globe that can be used to triangulate your position anywhere on the globe. And because they're all over the globe and not just these one single satellites in the sky, they therefore are a lot more decentralized and robust against some kind of central point of failure or attack. Right?
Layer 2 blockchain, layer 2 GPS.
Yeah.
Hey,
Any others, gentlemen?
I have one like very real use case for NFTs. AJ will get mad with this, guys, but it's like a real use case and it has a lot of money to a lot of people. I worked with these guys like a year ago. That is a whole lot of time in blockchain time. And these guys were doing a system of NFTs where you can be the owner of a tree, like a real tree in Brazil. They have a lot of land in Brazil. They have all the legal papers for it. Everything is on rule. So if you buy the NFT for that tree, apart from knowing the tree and having photos of the tree existing, when you pay for that tree, you are also paying for a plot of land that is going to be maintained by them. And that NFT give you back some tokens that are like carbon offsets. And that carbon offset is accepted by a lot of countries, and you can use those carbon offsets to offset the emissions of your companies. And it costs a lot less than the normal system for offset. So it's a way better for the environment because the companies that do environmental offsets are actually pollute a lot because they have a lot of people doing middlemen and asking for more money than they actually need and stuff. And with this, you can just buy a set of NFTs that which money is used to plant a lot of land in Brazil. Then those plots of lands are used to calculate an offset. All of that is legal in a lot of countries. They have all the papers on rule, and then they give you offsets for your company, like carbon offset for that plot
So
of land that you're maintaining.
I'm sorry, I wasn't 100% focused for part of that because I had a distraction
Okay.
that I shouldn't have dealt with, but I did. Okay, so as what I did I think what I heard was when you go to Walmart, you can donate $1 and get a ribbon that says I'm a donor. Is that what we're talking about?
What?
But at a
No.
government scale with
Nah.
trees?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
it is a vanity. NFTs are 100% a vanity play. There's no
Hey, no.
No, so NFTs are just a digital ownership certificate. So
You can use
NFTs
it.
can be
You can use
you
it.
use them for stock.
title to your vehicle, title to your
No, you can
property,
choose to a vehicle. Yeah, to a property.
concert ticket, whatever.
They can be associated with digital or physical assets.
But why would they ever be useful as physical assets that's not
We
Right
vanity?
now, a lot of companies
Or
are
okay,
using.
it's too much. It's too much. It's too much. It's too much. We got to peg this for round two. I'll somehow extract some of this explosion that we're having here at the end and line it up for round two.
All right, parting thought. I reject your question because all value is based on belief, and exchange of value is the fundamental basis of society.
I'm a programmer. Values based on functionality.
I'll
No,
recommend
but
this guy here.
so one thing, one thing that I think is really kind of a big takeaway, if we could really fast, is just that it's really important to try to imagine use cases beyond what you think is cool or useful, right?
I don't think
Because
anything's cool. I hate cool
there
stuff.
there are so
Cool
useful
AJ.
then, whatever you want to call it. But my point is just that it's so common, for example, for techies, fintech people, to think, oh, being poor is just like my life except with less money, right? And like they can't, they have so little imagination around what it's like to be another person. And what I'm asking for in this debate is just a little more creativity and imagination about how even if you don't like a certain thing, it might still be useful for lots of other people and
It's
industries.
it again. It's just useful relative to what already exists, kind of thing. So back to the weather. I still don't grasp how it's useful. So the level of complexity, the level of use has to increase somewhat relative to the level of complexity, and that's where. But we don't need to discuss that now. But it's not that the part of my imagination that's missing is if I can call someone on the telephone and verify the weather. Okay, great. I could also send them a text message. I could also send them an email. I could also encode it into a blockchain. they get the message it's just a transport method. Who cares what the transport method is? Why would I choose that transport method?
Or
That's
they might
where
have
my lack of
or they might have a
imagination.
gun to their head, and exploiting you with bad information, it benefits them in some way.
Yeah,
Then
I mean,
wouldn't they just put bad information on the blockchain?
I think the
Because
fallacy
that's
here,
hardest.
AJ, is the fallacy here is that your original question was actually about oracles and why that data was needed on chain to do something useful with it. And then what you're doing is you're forgetting that part of the argument, and then you're like cherry picking it for something else that really didn't originally apply to. And so I think you need to be more careful about like which version of the argument you're on right now.
Yeah,
Okay,
because it sounds to
moving the
me like you
goalposts.
keep
I'm
moving the
moving the
goalpost.
goalpost. I'm not keeping the
Yeah,
goalpost
yeah, yeah.
consistent. I can accept that. It's valid criticism. I guess in my defense, I'm so confused that I don't know which the goalpost is.
Well, it's
hard to
sort of
keep
like an
track of
iPhone, right? Like,
sometimes.
is it a phone? Is it a computer? Is it an internet, device or a music player? It's all of them.
Yeah, it's hard to
it's
keep
like
track of it.
it's like it's so as the technology, it's so many different things and has so many different applications. It's like, what is a computer? What can you do with a computer? Well, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it just sat there. It was a brick on your desk that you could do, basic calculator operations on. Well, what about now?
But I can play Snake on the blockchain, right? With a smart
Hey,
contract. If I get enough gas, I can play Snake.
yeah.
I suppose you could.
Can I
If
get gas if I get an apple?
Not gas, but the token, yes. Gas, no. Gas is wasted. It's used when you're interacting with a contract.
So
Depends
what
on
we
how many
need
people are
is
playing.
Twitch plays Ethereum Snake.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, if you want to know why someone would like to have digital papers in a blockchain, when you go to the Caribbean next time, try to lose your passport, and you'll have a lot of fun on why you'll need digitalized stuff.
Or try coming back to your house as a refugee after several years and somebody else is living in it.
Yeah, that's a great use
This,
case of
this thing is crazy
um,
down here.
nationless persons and anchored credentials is a really interesting use case.
So
Um,
it's dinner time, so we got to wrap this up.
Okay.
Hey, but we didn't give Ryan or Nate the chance to say what their favorite.
Oh,
Oh wait, Nate said he
I,
rejects
I,
the. He
I
rejects.
rejected the question.
Ryan, do you have
Oh,
anything you
good.
want to add?
I just want to add that
You're breaking up.
money is
There you go.
the biggest application. So I can sympathize with AJ's wondering about, what are the other applications. It seems difficult to wrap your head around the different non-monetary use cases because, well, blockchains are very inefficient, and there is a niche use case that they are tailored for and that they're built for, and that most applications probably are best done on a single server by a trusted company or whatever. But there are, there are other applications such as money that require global consensus and amongst people who don't trust each other. And that's where cryptocurrency, that's where blockchains really come in handy. And again, the blockchain term is not useful in most cases. Think of it more as consensus algorithms. This whole industry is, I would say, 90% about consensus, global untrusted consensus, and 10% is about the technology. So I always think of blockchains and cryptocurrency as the 3 E's. There's the ethics that underlies the whole thing. And then there's the economics that's built on top of the ethics. And then there's the engineering that's built on top of the ethics and the economics. And most people that have criticisms of blockchains, they're skipping right to the engineering, and they're saying, why do we need this engineering? We have these tools already. We have public-private asymmetric cryptography. We have all this stuff. And that's where you get to the Rube Goldberg machine-ness of it, because if you're just looking at it from an engineering perspective, you're missing the important part, which is the global untrusted consensus of global state. And that's why currency is probably the best use case. And I'm not saying that's the only use case, but most use cases do revolve around some kind of value transfer. And as far as the NFTs go, and I'm sympathetic to the gamers. For one thing, the cryptocurrency industry kind of exploded the prices of GPUs, and so they're all mad at us for that. I get it. But even on another level, the fact that everything, is becoming an NFT, and games, it kind of takes the fun away from games to some respect, in some respect. So, I'm not, you noticed I didn't have a whole lot to say about the NFT side and the non-monetary use cases, because I personally do believe that it's mostly about currency. But that's not a small thing. And if you think it's a small thing, you're wrong. Try to imagine a world without money. And that world without money looks a lot like poverty. That's not a small thing. I know that some people like to, belittle people that are into cryptocurrency and say, yeah, it's just all about the money. Well, sorry to say it, but money is important. And money is what lifts people out of poverty. So if you don't know that,
if you want to understand a very practical example of this, read up on Benjamin Franklin's trips to London and his meetings with the British Board of Trade, and how that led to the Bank of England petitioning the Parliament to pass the Currency Act, which led directly to the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War was not caused by the Tea Act or the Stamp Act. Any of those acts, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. The reason was the Currency Act and Parliament basically giving currency authority of the colonies to the Bank of England. That's why the Revolutionary War was fought. This country was founded to escape the tyranny of central banking.
Right, and so just like a world without money is a world of poverty, a world without sound money is also a world of poverty, just for most people. And there's probably, there's a 1% or whatever that escape that, and they can gather all of the value that the whole population builds up, and they can bring that into themselves, and that's what a corrupted money system can do. So yes, a world with money, but a corrupted money is a world where there's not global poverty, but there's a lot of people are in poverty, and just a 1% or 10% are okay. So that's not a world that I want to live in either. And that's what I think cryptocurrency solves, is it makes money more fair, more egalitarian. From a money, I don't have time to go into that egalitarian argument.
It's a topic for next time, I think.
That's a topic for next time. But there are some people that are, on the left side of things politically. There's a lot of value in cryptocurrency for you too, because it is about fairness and ethics and stuff like that. So it's not just for the ANCAPs.
Hard stop. I have to go.
Thanks, guys.
If I don't go, there will be no next time. All right. I love you guys. Thanks for joining. For everybody that left comments, let us know what should we discuss next time. Help guide this discussion in a direction that's useful for all y'all's.
Hey, go to Discord and fight with me if you want.
Oh yeah, so I'll drop a link to the Discord
right
now.
Dinner.
Oh
Thanks,
man,
guys.
I'm scared to drop a link to the Discord over this. But I gotta go.
Talk to you some other time.
People in the Discord, people in the comments are saying thank you and all that. So yeah, everybody, thank you. Thumbs up if you got them. Sub if you want to. I don't typically do blockchain stuff, but we're gonna have a couple more of these discussions. We'll see if I get converted to the true gospel or not. And
thanks, guys.
All right, adios.
Thanks.
Oh, it's just me now? Oh, well, goodbye, everybody.